and any organization loses billions of dollars. So we had spoken about American industry where they generally lose annually about $300 billion due to poor productivity. And poor productivity is due to poor employee engagement, and people are not engaged, so therefore they do not do their best. But if they are encouraged to do their best, if they do what is expected of them, and the term that was used was discretionary effort. If the discretionary effort is there, then the productivity would be very high. People would be able to contribute significantly to the organization, which is the expectation from every employee. And then the organizational productivity would also increase significantly. And it's a win-win because then you contribute more, the higher level of satisfaction, greater engagement, the company reaps the benefit of more engaged employees. So that is an important part of talent management, how to get people to be more engaged with the organization. So today we will look at two more dimensions of talent management. One of them is the skill matrix, and second is succession planning. Does anybody have a question? I can see a question. Oh, sorry, that's my cursor, which looks like a question mark. So sorry. So we will look at these two tools, which are very important in ensuring that talent is used optimally in an organization. Let me share my screen. Okay. So, so uh, Abhay, would you like to read the description of a skill
Yes.
matrix?
A skill matrix or competency matrix is a tool to map required and desired skills for a team or project. It is a grid that visualizes the required and available skills and competencies in a team. This makes it an essential tool for any data driven HR professional.
Thanks, Abhay. So a skill matrix is, or a competency matrix is a tool to map required and desired skills for a team or project. So basically, for example, the thermometer tells us that what is the temperature of our body. Now, there is no tool which tells us that what is the skill level of an organization. If I look at a balance sheet tells me that this is the revenue of a company. It tells me what is the profit after tax or what is the margin of a company. But there is no tool which tells me that what is the skill level of this company. So let's say if somebody says, what is the skill level of Apple? What do you think is the skill level? High, low, medium, very high? What do you
Apple is
think is
high.
the skill level?
Apple,
Sorry, Abhay?
sir, Apple this
Yes,
computer. Apple is
yes,
high skill,
yes.
high, very high.
Yeah. Why do you think so?
Because it is engaged in this innovativity, very innovative, introduces very innovative products. So pioneer in introducing new things. So therefore, it's imply maybe highly skilled.
Okay, good. Thank you. So we can make out from Apple's products that they must be highly skilled. We don't know whether they're highly skilled or not, but since their products, like Abhay said, are very good, they are very innovative, so their skill level must be high, you know. So suppose I did not have the balance sheet of a company and I say that, oh, look, this company has about 50 offices in different parts of the country. So there must be a big organization, you know. So we look at the output of a company and decide that this must be this. Because as far as skills is concerned, there is no metric. So we don't know whether Apple is very highly skilled or not. But because their products are good, because they're very innovative, because they do new things, we are guessing that their skill level must be good. Okay. So now here is an example of a skill matrix. So you can look up, different skills. It could be business acumen, it could be data analysis, it could be advanced data analysis or data visualization, HR knowledge, data warehousing, whatever. So you can look it up for different people or different employees in the company, and you can say that what is the level of proficiency or how good are they at each of these things. And along with proficiency, we are also here. Sometimes this yardstick is used, sometimes it is not used, which is interest level. So we say that, let's say Jonathan, his business acumen proficiency is 3, which is advanced level. Interest level is 1. So interest is 0 or 1. That means either he's interested or not interested. While the proficiency is on a 4-point scale, and it says that it is 0, 1, 2, 3. So this gives us an idea that Jonathan is like this. Alden is similar on some skills like business acumen. He is very similar to Jonathan. Tracy is much lower. Sandra is somewhere between Alden and Tracy in business acumen. So this is a very useful tool because it tells you the level of each employee on multiple skill parameters. Okay. And this is basically the skill matrix. Now, what is the benefit? What is the use of a skill matrix? So here let's look at how it benefits different stakeholders. So a skill matrix helps to drive performance in multiple ways. It is not only beneficial to the team, but also to the individual, organization, and potentially internal and external clients. So let's see how it benefits. So how does it benefit the team? The competency matrix is primarily a tool to help the team as a whole. The team gets a quick overview of both the skills that are present and the ones that are missing. These missing skills can then be found by hiring people with the relevant competencies. In addition, the team is more aware of its own weak points and can take extra care to prevent missing skills from interfering with performance. So, any thoughts on this skill matrix helping the team?
Sir, how to measure this skill? Means in which person, which skill is up to 4 point or 1 point or 3 points? So how can we measure?
Yes, Abhay, I will come to that. Okay, so right now we are looking at skill matrix being very useful for a team, and it is actually very useful because any team gets to know that what are they good at and what are the areas where they are not so good, and therefore they need to guard against that. For example, let's say I have a quality team, and the quality team we discover is very good at ensuring compliance. It is very good at audits. It is very good at product knowledge and process knowledge, but it has a weak point. It is not good at data representation. So that means this quality team does hard work. It knows what it's supposed to know in terms of how to ensure compliance, how to do the audit, but it is not good at representing data. So once the team gets to know this, what do you think the team will do?
Bridge the gap.
Absolutely. If if somebody tells them that, this is a problem with this team, then immediately they will bridge the gap. They will say, okay, we didn't realize. Now we will make sure that we will improve our strength in data representation. Similarly, very often what happens is an individual doesn't know what is her strengths or what is her areas of improvement. And the individual believes that she is very good. But when you are assessed on a skill matrix, the individual realizes that I have some strengths and I have some development areas also. So here comes the individual. So the skill matrix also helps individuals twofold. First, it gives the individual insight in their own competencies and what they bring to the table and what are missing. So this is a excellent starting point for learning and development opportunities also, because the training team, if they are given this map of every individual and every team, they know who are the people who need training, who need support, and which are the teams which are already strong in various areas. So therefore they can create a strategic map of how to support the business. So therefore the skill matrix is very useful for a team. It is very useful for a individual also. Next, for the organization, on a larger scale, the organization gets an overview of available competencies and areas of improvement. So just like as an individual, when we go for a whole body test, and you get multiple reports that LFT, KFT, cholesterol, red blood corpuscles, white blood corpuscles, what is the state of your health? Similarly, when you get a skill matrix, an organization gets to know that these are the strengths that the organization carries because the skills are very good in these areas. And these are the areas where we are not so good. And therefore, like you rightly said, the gap needs to be bridged in those places. So the organization gets an overview of available competencies and areas of improvement. And these are the areas that the organization can now invest their learning and development budget into in order to function better. In addition, these competency matrices can help to redistribute internal talent to places it is most needed. So suppose I have somebody who's very good in sales, and he is heading, Western India. While in Eastern India, I find that sales is not very strong. They are not able to get new deals or new accounts. While West India already has a very powerful sales team. So what I will do is I will take one of the experts from Western India and put her in Eastern India, because now then it balances. Similarly, I see that my leadership is very strong in North India, but in South India, we have attrition. We are the clients are not rating us high, so seems to be some gap. So we will plug that gap and try to strengthen the leadership in Chennai. So and so forth. So basically, a skill matrix is a very good insight into the strengths and area of improvement of an organization. Next, for the clients, so this is especially true of IT clients and BPO clients, because in a manufacturing setup, the clients are not interested about skill matrix, which is an internal tool. But in a IT company or a BPO company where the clients are deeply involved in your business, so here the client is the final stakeholder. The client receives better service if it has better skill sets, and it doesn't really matter whether these are internal or external clients. The teams have increased awareness of missing skills, which help to prevent pitfalls. So There you can see the benefits of the skill matrix.
So just one basic question. I'm sorry
Yeah.
to ask it right now, but I'm not very clear. Like you have mentioned skill metrics here, and then somewhere in like describing the team, you are using the phrase competency metrics.
Right.
So it's completely synonymous. I thought skills and competencies are different, but the matrix turns out to be the same practically when you apply it.
No, actually, in this slide, this is more of a competency matrix because you have the interest level also. Okay, and you have, so the competency is this ability to do, and also the willingness to do it and to be able to do it repeatedly under various conditions. So competency is a more comprehensive adjective as compared to skill. Skill is simply the ability to do something, but whether I want to do it or not, whether I see a future in it or not, whether I'm keen to learn or grow my skill in this area or not, all that falls under competency. So competency is a more is a bigger umbrella term as compared to skill. So therefore, competency matrix becomes more difficult than creating a skill matrix. Skill matrix is still easier because we will just see how it is done. Uh, you simply look at the skill and you give it a rating, whether it is a self rating, whether it is a manager's rating, whether it is a peer rating, whether it is an external client rating. It could be anybody's rating. But competency is slightly more complex, and it involves the willingness uh, and the disposition of the person to do that task.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sure, welcome. Okay, any other questions? Okay. So
This, you
trust,
said,
sir, one question.
yes,
Sir,
Rakesh.
one question. Sir, what is the competence to have trust in the system? What the company has to do so that the employee believes that this matrix is correct, or it is trustworthy?
Or it is just
Trustworthy.
okay. Yes, so we will see that when we come to how a skill matrix is created. Now, a lot of trust is developed by the process that is followed. If you follow a genuine, honest, transparent process, then the output that you get becomes trustworthy. But if you cut corners and the process is not transparent, then it becomes untrustworthy. You will see that in a lot of African countries, when election is held and somebody wins, the opposition declares that, oh no, he is not won because the process has been not been fair, it has not been transparent, we don't believe this election is right. So the process is very critical, and similarly that is true in skill matrix also. If you follow the process properly, honestly, with transparency, then people will respect the output. But if it is not followed properly, it is just at the end you create a very beautiful presentation and present it without having followed the process, then people will not have trust.
Sir, my question was on this the skills of the people who will be doing this skill matrix analysis.
Right.
Again, it is internal or external? That is what I wanted to learn.
Okay, so it can be either external or internal, depending on whether the organization wants to get a HR consultant to do it from outside, or they want to do they want to do it internally through their own HR. So it can be both, and it's not necessary if somebody does it from outside, it is trustworthy, and if somebody does it internally, it is not trustworthy. It could be either way.
Okay, sir.
You can use a consultant to do this, but that will not necessarily, I can tell the consultant all kinds of things to fetch the data, and the consultant will fetch the data and come out with a beautiful skill matrix, but it may not actually reflect the level of skill in your company.
So my question was in regarding this only, how difficult is it to develop a matrix, and what if what are the symptoms when we realize that okay, it's going wrong somewhere?
Okay. Uh, so let's go through one or two more slides, Vinita, and if if your answer does not come to you, then we can come back to this question.
Sure, sir.
So now we talk about the steps to build the skill matrix. So first of all, we need to define what are the relevant skills. Now, there is no universal set of skills for every company. Different companies focus on different skills. So we have to identify that for us, for a company X, what are the most important skills. So we start with the most important, define the relevant skills for a project team. Skill matrices are often created by a manager or the HR department to improve team performance. Okay, so just once. So the manager has to evaluate which skills are missing to prevent the team from missing deadlines, internal conflict, or costs later on. That's why we start with an assessment of the relevant skills and competencies needed to complete a project. This is also input for competencies that you will assess the team members on, as it prevents you from assessing a long list of irrelevant competencies. So it is very important that we are very clear on what is it that I want to evaluate the team on. You can focus on, a Pareto kind of a mindset, saying that 20% skills are most important for 100% of the deliveries or 80% of the deliveries. Or I can say that, look, let me create a entire laundry list of all the skills. So that is something which varies, but focus should be only on a few critical skills. So that is first, you identify those, then assess each of your team members on their current skills. So where are they? Suppose, let's say, uh, project management is a very critical skill. Now I will evaluate all my team members on, uh, either it could be a 5-point scale or a 4-point scale. Let's say 4-point scale. So we say that what is the proficiency? They have no capability, which is level 1. Level 2, basic level of capability. Level 3, uh, sorry, level 3, intermediate level of capability. Level 4, advanced capability. So now I will, put these 4 levels of proficiency and say that project management, let's say Benita is a project manager in this company, and there are 4 levels. And I think that first of all, I will ask Benita herself to evaluate herself. So do a self evaluation. Where do you think you are? And she may say that I am at a level 3, which is intermediate level of capability. Okay, so that is a, first of all, this is the first layer, which is a self evaluation. Next, you may use a 180-degree feedback. So it may go to your manager, and your direct manager may also evaluate you and say that, okay, Benita thinks she's level 3, but I feel that she's somewhere between level 2 and level 3. So, but I will be conservative and I will mark her at level 2, which is basic level of capability. So this is done deliberately to offset a problem which is a common phenomena in all of us. We tend to overrate ourselves. We tend to feel that we are actually we have more ability than we actually have. So this is known as the Dunning-Kruger effect, where we have a higher level of belief in ourselves than what is merited by our capability level. So to offset this self-confidence, a second rating is taken from the manager, and I do a basic level of self-rating, then it goes to the manager, and manager also then evaluates you and sees that, okay, Manita has marked herself X. I think she is not X and a bit below. So therefore, there is a correction that happens. Now, moving on, you can even look at a 360-degree feedback, where you would look at your peers also, and most importantly, people who report to you. Okay. So not only you and your manager, but people who report to you and your peers and maybe customers. So it's a 360-degree feedback, and everybody evaluates you on where you are. Now, I have seen some evaluations where I have rated myself, it's not me, I'm just giving an example, that I have rated my team handling skills at level 3 against the highest level 4, while my team has rated my team handling skill at 1. So look at the discrepancy. I think I am 3, my team thinks I am 1. So that's also a reflection of the Dunning-Kruger effect, that I feel that, look, I know everything, or I'm very good at managing my team. But when my team is asked, they say, no, 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 no. He is only at level 1. He has a long way to go. He has to learn a lot of things. And my manager also may give me a certain rating. My customer may also give me a certain rating. Okay. Then moving on, you determine a person's interest in working on the tasks they have proposed. So in addition to the previous step, you need more than just skills. People also need to like the work that you're good at. Most of the time this is the case, but sometimes it isn't. In those cases, your skill matrix may show that you have someone competent at a crucial task. But if the person is unwilling to perform the task, you still hit a dead end. So therefore, like we saw in the previous slide, you also have whether they are interested in it or they are not interested. So you can bring this knowledge together and create a genuine competency matrix instead of just a skill matrix. And now, fourth, last but not least, you incorporate all these inputs into a skill matrix, and you get a overview of where the skills of the company stands. Okay. Any questions so far?
So isn't there a lot of perception based creating this lot of perception rather than realistic a manager तो मुझे टीम को में गोल देना है तो then they will do it in this way. Lot of perception, a lot of human based evaluation rather than more factual, isn't it?
Right. You are right. So yes, there is a lot of perception. There is a lot of subjectivity, because there is no mathematical way of finding out the skill set unless we do a assessment center or something like that. So, but the thing is, the subjectivity is checked by 2 or 3 people, giving the rating. As a result, what happens is that
Sir,
as a result,
I have personal one experience that once the system is implemented in few banks, private banks, however bad the service is, they will back to the customer, sir, some phone call will give you have to give me 10, and more or less they are able to persuade the customer to give good rating. While the customer has suffered for 2-3 days, that thing, and this way bosses, subordinate, they are in harmony. And I inspected one organization where everybody is giving 10 out of 10 to each other.
so Rakesh, that's exactly what I was saying. People have trust only if the process is followed. If the process is made a mockery of, if we are making a mockery of the process, then there will be no trust in this. Then this is a useless tool. But if the process is followed, then it is a very useful tool. Okay. Suppose I do a employee engagement survey.
No, sir. Is there some cross-checking sort of system some organization has done very well? That is what we want to learn.
Okay. So yeah, so I want to share how it is used in IBM. I was in IBM for 8 years. IBM has a very robust skill matrix, and what it does is, first, every year it is on a system. It is on the learning management system, and every year it is opened for employees to self-evaluate. Once they self-evaluate and they submit, then So all the skills that are there for you are shown, come against your profile. So suppose I am a people manager, which means I'm a manager with a team of, let's say, 30 people. So the managerial skills show, and also there could be one or two functional skills. Like for a manager, he should understand basics of finance. So I do a self-evaluation, I submit, it goes, the trigger goes to my manager. Then the manager looks at what I have submitted for myself. She or he may change some of the ratings. That okay, he thinks he's very good at team management. I think he's okay at team management. He thinks he's very good at customer interaction. I think he's just about okay. So they may reduce some of the ratings, and some of the ratings may even get increased. Then the manager submits it. Okay. Then it goes to HR. HR takes a dump of the entire department that this is how it is looking. And then they share it with the HOD. The HOD goes through it along with some of the key decision makers, and they see that this is what it is looking like. So they may open it for a peer review also, but it may not be opened. But that option is there in the system. And then at the end of the year, you get that this is the strong areas, this is the areas of improvement, and so everything happens on the system. There is nobody calling up anybody and saying that aap mera 10 bhar do, aap mera 9 bhar do ya kuch. Well, it's a part of the process, and everybody has to fill it within the first quarter. This should get populated and closed. And also, very importantly, this goes into the GOM, or the Global Opportunity Marketplace, which means that there is a global opportunity market. Suppose in Japan, they are looking for a project manager. India, so this entire sheet is accessible to everybody globally, and they can see all the managers' names with their levels of skill. Now, suppose in Japan, they're looking for a manager who is good in very good in client communication, and they see that there is this manager in India who's very good in client communication. So this is your, just like in Naukri.com, your CV reflects. In the IBM Global Opportunity Marketplace, everybody's skill matrix reflects. So everybody can see everybody's skill level from there, and it is a system which works quite smoothly. Does that help?
So that would help if it's a very big organization like IBM. But like Yamini also put this thought in the chat. How do you judge those matters? I have, it has happened with me, like when I was working in Radio Mirchi, and the skill
Your
matrix.
voice is cracking. If you can go a bit slowly.
Sorry.
Your voice is breaking. If you can go a bit slowly.
Yeah. So the issue, Yamini has also raised that issue in a chat. That is the same thought that I have, that how and who is to be the judge? Yes, you are saying that because it's a continuous process, but this will happen when the organization is very big. Like when I was in Radio Mirchi, for example, we were 7 people, right, in Ahmedabad office. So the numbers were very less, and the challenge was that based on these figures, the KRA was linked to that, and then the bell curve was linked to these figures. So this was not a standalone thing, which obviously in organization doesn't happen. So because of the bell curve, then they will say कि अरे यार मेरे को किसी का तो कम करना पड़ेगा, तो तुम्हारा skill कम है इससे. There was no other logic. Ki bhai yaar, I'm supposed to talk to people, I'm doing that. I'm supposed to handle the team, I'm doing that. But they'll say, yeah, but what can we do in Ahmedabad? We are only giving 4. Because that was linked to KR and then the bell curve and then your promotion. These figures were skewed in that manner. So in IBM, if there are such huge numbers, I guess it makes sense. But is it the same in smaller organizations also?
So, Benita, actually, there are certain tools which are meant to help you in decision making when you are operating on a very large scale. But sometimes what happens is organizations which are not on such a large scale, they adopt those tools. and then they do not do justice to those tools. So yes, a skill matrix is a tool. See, basically, whether it is a skill matrix, whether it is a bell curve, these are tools which have to be used in a larger organization, because larger organizations, if they don't have very good systems and processes, then decision making becomes very difficult. So they have to create objective processes. It cannot be dependent on people. For example, IBM at one point of time had 4 lakh people, 4 lakh employees. Now with 4 lakh employees, you cannot decide, manager deciding, I think you are okay, I think you are not okay. They cannot leave it to the subjectivity of managers. So therefore, these systems are used to evaluate the strengths and the opportunity areas. Now, second thing is, as I'm saying again and again, the value of a tool is only as good as the process that is followed to populate that tool. If the process is good, if the process is fair, if the process is transparent, if there is no ulterior motive in the process, then it will be effective. But if I'm going to link it to post ranking, if I'm going to link it to appraisals, then I'm making it more complex. I'm making it more difficult to implement. And basically, the whole idea of understanding where my skills are in this organization and where I need to focus on, that basic idea gets lost, because I am linking it to the post rankings. That is not right. It can be used as an input only if there is a tie, but otherwise it should not be used in post rankings. The purpose of this tool is different. But if people are going to use it for all kinds of purposes to prove that I am superior and he is inferior, then the whole purpose is defeated.
Yeah, but in corporate, how are you going to stop that usage?
So then that is what reflects mature leadership versus not so mature leadership.
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, this may be used for improvement only, not for evaluation or promotion or something.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. This is meant only to give you a check that where does the skill of my team lies and where do we need to improve. That's all. It should not be used for other things.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sure, Benita. But I agree with you that when you said that this is being used, so there are so many organizations which love to use tools, and the HR heads or whoever is the head of department, they love to bring in some tool and say that, look, I introduced this, but nobody really knows what will be the benefit of this tool, what is the original purpose of this tool, and how should you deploy this tool. I know somebody who came from a very large organization to a small organization, and he said that अब मैं competency framework बनाऊंगा, आप लोगों के पास competency framework ही नहीं है, तो आप कैसे काम करोगे? Now, in a startup, you don't need a very detailed competency framework, but that man got some HR consulting company. He sat on a structure for 6 months and then finally created one. And I believe till date, nobody has used it seriously. So therefore, one has to be careful about what is the original purpose of a tool, how is it being used, and how is it being developed. This is a litmus test we should apply to every tool that is used in a system. Okay, so
Okay, sir, the crux of the matter is that if you can know the person directly in a small group, there is no need to go for these tools which are for very large organizations.
yes, and more importantly, our focus is what is this tool, how does it work? And you are right that it is not very useful in smaller organizations. If there are 20 people, we all know each other, we are all working from the same building, then this tool will not help us. But if we are spread across 160 countries and there are 4 lakh employees, then the tool is very useful. Okay, so let's look at a video which tells us, how to develop this tool.
Welcome to the project Dynamic SME. In this presentation, Paula Dinamica will illustrate the knowledge management tool Competence Matrix to the entrepreneur Victor. Hey Paula, how are you?
Hi Victor, good, and you?
More or less. Well, I'm seeing problems regarding the lack of training in some of my employees. On the level they are operating, my employees are supposed to have certain skills in order to do their activities efficiently. However, I have come to know that some are lacking of these skills. What can you offer or recommend me to do?
Have you heard of the competence matrix?
No, I haven't heard of it.
Well, I have already applied it in my enterprise. This tool allows me to structure, evaluate and visualize the skills and competencies that are with my employees. That way, I have a good overview who can and who can't do something. I think the application of this tool would be great help for you to solve your problem, Victor.
And Paula, why have you decided to use this knowledge management tool? How can it help me with my problems?
Well, I decided to apply this tool because I was in the situation once that an important employee who had the task to run and maintain the enterprise homepage had to leave for several months. A little later, the homepage stopped working, creating high costs and a large threat to my sales. The competence matrix allowed me to become aware who are my important employees, experts in performing certain tasks, and gave me an overview which of my employees would be hired to substitute once having left the company. The implementation of such a plan, Victor, will bring you many advantages.
Really? Well, tell me which ones.
You will be able to realize the following. The competence matrix will show you the skills and competences that are missing in your company, or the skills that are not very well distributed currently. It will furthermore allow you to evaluate and determine the needs of training among your employees. If you are able to increase the distribution of skills among your employees, your enterprise will become more flexible. And if you're looking for new personnel, the competence matrix will help you to define a profile of skills for new potential employees.
Very interesting, Paula. But how can I build such a competence matrix?
It is actually really easy. It only requires a few steps. Identify the competencies among your employees and put these competencies into a matrix.
Well, can you explain the competence matrix a little more in detail for me, Paula?
Of course, Victor. In the first step, try to identify the competencies that your employees apply on a daily basis. I choose to do so through brainstorming on a blackboard. Then you can group certain competencies into categories, such as, for example, manufacturing process technology, language, design, and social skills. Then put the names of your employees into the rows and competencies into the columns. In the following step, Victor, each employee will then evaluate his capacity to which he can fulfill certain competencies. My employees are classifying themselves by putting 3 pluses if they have a very good capacity in performing these tasks, 2 pluses if they can perform a task independently, and 1 plus if they are still learning how to apply this task. Later, you can evaluate the matrix together with the employees and make corrections if needed. Once this step is finished, looking vertically, you will be able to analyze the capacities of all employees to perform a certain task. Looking horizontally, you will have a performance profile of your employees.
Wow, this tool is indeed quite easy to use. Well, since you have been applying this tool in your enterprise for quite some time now, what are key aspects to keep in mind? What do you think is important to keep in mind when implementing a competence matrix?
One key element is that you should avoid gaps in knowledge. That is, in any discipline, prevent the situation that you have just one person with the highest score, meaning 3 pluses. Because if this person then leaves your company, then this may substantially reduce the performance of your company. You should furthermore set minimum standards for each discipline. In my company, which is medium in size, I have come to the conclusion that at least 2 employees should have the highest score for each category.
Thank you very much for your help, Paula.
You're welcome, Victor. And if you need more information, I have some interesting links here for you. Or you may also access the information on the homepage of Dynamic SME, which also helped me to implement the knowledge management tool.
Okay, did that help you understand how this tool works?
Yes. Somehow seeing that it made me think it's pretty easy, but I don't think it's that easy.
Yeah, actually, it is not very complex. I have, used this tool, and it's very simple. Only thing is, yes, people should do it honestly, as far as possible. Of course, we cannot be completely honest. We like there is this psychological tool called Dunning-Kruger effect. So that is human psychology. Sometimes, if let's say on a scale of 5, I am actually 3, I may think I am 4. So that happens. But to check that, you also have the master as managers rating. You also have the peers rating and the team members rating. So that is a 360-degree. So basically, there is a checks and balance inside the tool, and if there is a wrong rating, that gets cancelled out, and it becomes more accurate. Another way it can be used is if HR implements it very strongly and they follow a very strong discipline. Before implementing it, they do a session with everyone. They clarify that that there is no negative impact, because people become suspicious that if my skill is discovered to be lower than average, then they may ask me to leave, or they may not give me a good project. So that assurance has to come from HR that this is a honest exercise only for developmental purpose. No other intention is there behind this exercise. Then people start becoming more honest, but that also depends on the culture of organization. There are very few organizations I've come across which are genuine, open, and employee friendly. Okay, so if there
That
are
is
no
what
other,
they start with a lot of pomp about being honest and it being only a L&D tool. But after a year or after seeing the figures, the CEO or the business people jump in, take the tool from hands of HR and use it for some other purpose. That is what I was asking when I said that when do you know that now this purpose of this tool is being misused?
yes, Vinita, you are right. And unfortunately, I will not say that there is some checks and balance against that. That is simply a misuse, and there is nobody who can stop the CEO from misusing this tool. So yes, I raise my hands in defeat as far as that situation is concerned.
I seem to be, because of my experience, sorry sir, I seem to be seeing the negative side. I won't comment now.
No, it's okay. I have been working for 25 years, and I'm sure many of you have been working for many years. And like Abhay also pointed out that uh, or I think Rakesh mentioned that people go and get the best rating for themselves. So that happens in an employee satisfaction survey also. I think we had discussed last time that the manager is standing behind and saying that मेरे को 10 में से 10 दे दो, नहीं दोगे तो फिर देख लूंगा. So the employee is giving a rating of 10 out of 10 to his manager, and though he probably in his heart he wants to give 2 out of 10, but the manager is standing right behind and saying, "Jaldi likho 10 out of 10 or submit karo." So he's doing that. So I have seen that situation also. And in that, what happens is the managers who are honest, who do not do these kind of things, and they are good people, but they have some areas of improvement. So those managers get a rating of 7 out of 10, while the bad managers who are always bullying their teams, they are sitting at 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10.
Sir, one real example from a public sector company, I tell you. Once this employee gave a bad feedback, 360-degree feedback, and which was genuinely bad.
Okay.
The boss was wrong. So what happened that the boss was very fond of that chamcha boss. So the boss called this person and said that what you have done, he is such a bright person, he is due for this thing, in chargeship, this thing, that thing. And the poor employee, he said, sir, had you told me in advance, I would have given him some good rating, but now I already submitted. He said, no, I have brought your form. So poor employee, now his own form, physical form was there, and he has to change it.
Yes, that is the ground reality. So very often when I'm training a batch, or like we are in this training, we have to say what is there in the textbook. Okay, but the actual reality is that whatever is given in the textbook may not be happening on the ground. So if Benita says that this is not how it works, I completely agree with Benita that on the ground this is not what happens. But at least from a syllabus point of view, we have to understand what does the textbook say, what does the HR manual say, what is the right way of doing it. Yes, in reality it may not be happening, but that doesn't mean that I will not know what is the ideal way of doing it. So therefore we have to know the ideal way. Nita, are you trying to say something?
Oh, sorry sir, by mistake.
Okay. So very often when I train people, I say that, this is how you need to give feedback to your team. Don't shout at them. Don't scream at them. Try to understand, explain to them what has gone wrong, explain what is the implication of having done something wrong, how will it impact the business, then say that what are the things you are going to do going forward. So people say, sir, आपने हमें तो सिखा दिया, अगर आप हमारे मैनेजर को क्यों नहीं सिखाते, वो तो गाली गलौज करते हैं, और आप इतनी अच्छी चीजें सिखा रहे हो कि ऐसे बोलना चाहिए, ऐसे बोलना चाहिए, अगर कुछ गलत हो गया तो उसका जो इम्प्लीकेशन है वो दिखाना चाहिए लोगों को, instead of shouting at them. So this is very nice and we will follow it, but why don't you train our managers to do this? They are always shouting at us, and therefore we go and shout at our team. So that is a challenge that is always there. What is ideal and what is real? Okay, so let's move to the second part, which is a very important part of talent management, which is succession planning. So succession planning is very critical Any thoughts why it is critical?
So in sometimes it may happen that a person is taking everything independently, and in the absence of due to any reason, if he leaves organization or he gets promoted, then thereafter a vacuum can be created. So to avoid this, succession planning help that once a person, a key person leaves, another person is in pipeline, that he can take the charge, and organization should not suffer.
Right. Thank you.
It also gives continuity to the organization, which is very crucial in case of leaving, promotion, or expansion. And the skill and the experience developed for that particular organization, for that particular role or a culture, it is handed down. And inherently, if it's properly applied, it helps automatic mentoring by the senior to a junior.
Right, Benita. Very good. Yes. So that is what the succession planning really does for organization. We know that we are living in a very uncertain world. It is very volatile, uncertain, complex. So now in this world, it's very important that you should be ready for all eventualities. Anything can happen, particularly now with the way COVID is raging across the country. So for every company, to be able to deal with such uncertainty, they have to have their key talent identified upfront. And then everybody cannot be, ready in a day. So they have to be readied across a certain amount of time, maybe 1 year, 2 year. For example, in ITC, if you remember, Yogi Deveshwar was there. And Yogi Deveshwar was 71 years old when he suddenly died. And he had headed the company for about 15 years. And he had headed it very well. So when he passed away suddenly, the person who had been designated as the CEO was quickly able to take over, and he has been heading the company quite smoothly because he was being groomed for 5 years to become the CEO of the company. So when you identify the key positions and you then start grooming people to take over the positions that have been identified for them, it becomes a fairly smooth transition. So that's the whole exercise that is done. That is what succession planning is all about. Now, you can see that, there's a pie chart over here, and you can see that some organizations are ready in terms of their leadership pipeline. Some are likely to be ready. The majority are likely to be ready in 1 to 12 months. And some would need even more than 12 months to ensure that there is a smooth succession. So succession planning is a process of identifying, developing, and transitioning potential successors for the company's present and future key roles aligned with the talent and ambition of its current employees and talent network. So you have, some nice statistics over here. So the bottom of the pyramid says there is no succession process at all, and may include identification of successors for executive level. Replacement planning, approximately 15% of organizations today function at this level. They do a replacement planning rather than a succession planning. They do a replacement planning, which is different from succession planning, which means that if somebody is left or somebody has moved to another responsibility, then you just quickly go and look for a replacement. 52% operate at this level, which is a traditional succession plan, and integrated succession management. Fewer than 12% of the companies achieve this level of maturity. So, and on top, which is the highest level of maturity, transparent talent mobility, there are no organizations at all, which is, you know, maybe Google has it, I don't know. But Google had a very enlightened HR head, Laszlo Bock, and he's also written a book in terms of how HR processes are managed in Gurgaon. In sorry, Google. What am I saying? So so, but I don't know. I mean, this is they haven't mentioned, but Google is supposed to have very advanced HR processes. But okay, anyway, so far as this maturity level diagram says that no company has a very good talent mobility system. So moving on, some issues with succession planning. There is
Sir, there is limitations also, na, that it is very difficult to reach. It is like limits and continuity. Na? You can approach 100, but not 100.
right. No, you are right. Yeah, there is a lot of difficulty, particularly in smaller organizations. You do not have, a replacement for every role. For example, just a coincidence. Last week I got a mail from our global office asking me that who is my successor. So of course, when somebody asks you that kind of a question, it should worry you. And I was also worried that who's my successor? Why do they want to know my successor? Then I discovered that everybody at my level has got similar mails asking them about who their successor is.
No, sir,
And
but this may be
people who
for
are
your
below me.
promotion. This can be for your promotion also.
So after working for many years, like Benita said, I also think like that. So while yes, it could be for promotion, it would be for other reasons also. So, but then I discovered that even people below me, they have also got similar mails. So that's a standard mail which has come to everyone. So if there is a proper structure in many departments, there is no proper structure. So if you have a senior VP and the next person is a DGM, there is no VP, there is no GM, so it's empty. Then after the DGM, you have a deputy manager. There is no manager, there is no senior manager. So so many levels are missing. Because of various reasons, people may have left and no replacement took place, or organization has grown suddenly and some positions have not been filled. There has been no planned headcount management. So therefore, all kinds of reasons, but there are significant gaps. So like over here, the point says insufficient internal management bench. Sometimes you do not have people who can take over within 1 year, or the cost of replacing key employees from outside may be very high, or turnover of high potentials may be very high. So you can see the numbers, how organizations deal with that. So for example, turnover of high potentials, 39% of the organizations are not up to speed on this. And when they lose people, they are not able to replace them quickly or even get them from outside.
So, sir, this chart that you showed would be different for niche positions and different for lower positions, right? Or it is pretty much an amalgamated thing.
This is amalgamated. That's what I can sense. But generally, succession planning is really effective for niche positions. It would not be for all positions.
Okay, thank you.
This is mostly called a key man replacement.
Yeah, key person, key roles need to be manned. Not all roles. So how does one do succession planning? So one does, first of all, like we looked at the skill matrix, you do a talent assessment. What kind of a talent does the organization need and what does it have? And what are the gaps between the two? Then talent aspiration, who are our top leaders? What are their career aspirations? What do we need to do to retain them? Do we have successors in the pipeline? Then talent selection. Are we able to attract the right talent to support our business objectives? Can we identify internal and external expertise? So these are very important questions. I was working for a BPO company, one of the very large BPO companies, and I don't know if you are aware of the BPO industry, but in 1998 and 99 and 2000, 2001, when the BPO industry was born in India, at that time, the initial BPO companies, there were just two companies. One was GE Capital and the other was American Express. So they knew that all the business will come from America. So what they did was they hired some people from the consulting companies, like McKinsey and Boston Consulting, and they sent those people to America to get business. And these people got business, but most of them who had joined, they left within 6 months. And these BPO companies were very surprised that we sent them to America, we paid so much money, we gave them good salary, and all of these fellows left. So then they discovered was that BPO is a very repetitive task. People who are consultants, they want variety, they want new challenges, they want a lot of reputation of a thought leader. They don't want to do BPO. So here, this question that you see in talent selection, are we attracting the right talent to meet our current and future business objectives? So this was not understood properly by the BPO industry. Then they did a re-evaluation and they discovered that what do we need, to do BPO transition? What do we need? We need very smart people. Yes, that's why we took consultants, but consultants are not interested in this. So who are the next smartest people in the market whom we can hire, who are not very expensive also, and who may stay with us for a longer time? So who do you think they chose? A question to you. Which profile did they choose to run the BPO companies? Who were smart, who were happy to be in BPO, who were committed to staying with BPO companies for a longer time? Who were these profiles?
Their own employees.
No, as I said, that BPO industry was new at that time. They did not have everybody was new.
Might be from hospitality industry.
Okay, who said that?
Rakesh.
Okay, Rakesh, you get a virtual chocolate. Yes, you are absolutely right. So the BPO industry started looking for graduates from hotel management, because people who are in some of the bigger hotels like Taj, Oberoi, Kempinski, Leela. So these people are very smart. They are very presentable, and hospitality industry is very tough. So when they were hired and they were given chance to travel abroad, given better salaries and work in a global environment, they were very happy and they stayed with the company for a very long time. And the need for the right talent to meet the current and future business objective was met. So this is a very critical exercise. I was in a startup once, and the startup was owned by a very rich industrialist. So his idea was that we will get the best IIT IIM guys, and he got very good IIT IIM guys. But the point was that he did not have enough business to make them stick. So this whole talent strategy was wrong. And as one could have predicted, they left. So therefore, your talent strategy has to be right to meet your current and future business objectives. You look for stability, look for the right people in the right place at the right time, all that makes a difference. And then you look at talent development, which is how do you nurture that talent, which is very, very important. You have to nurture that talent and bring them up to the level where they can take up the responsibilities that have been identified for them. Now, typically, companies do that in two ways. One is they give the opportunities to the people who are being groomed for succession, but the designation is not given to them. Only the responsibility is given to them, and they are put under observation and to see how are they performing in spite of not having the designation. And the second way to do it is that they are given the designation, and now they are given the full responsibility and the designation, and then they are observed to see how they are doing. Generally, more mature companies do the first thing, not the second one. But at times, particularly when talent is short, you do not have too many talented people. So companies are forced to the second alternative. Okay, so moving on, it is a very simple process. First, to identify what are the key positions. Then, what is your key talent in the organization? Assessment of key talent. Then you groom that talent. Then you support them through transition. And eventually they take over the positions that they have been identified to take over. So this process is greatly influenced by the appraisal process also. For example, in many companies, you will see the appraisal process immediately tells you who are the high potential people in the company, who are the people who have got a rating of 1 or A. And those people who have got the highest rating will typically be your most important talent pool. And you may want to look at your succession planning through this pool that you have, who are the top performers. Okay. Is it making sense? All quiet?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so moving on, like we saw that first and most important is that you have to identify the positions across the organization that directly impact key business factors like revenue, product development, marketing, research, human resource management. So you have to identify what are these key positions. And two factors can be looked at. One is criticality. What is the impact this position has on strategic imperatives of the organization, which is the business results, external internal customers, characteristics of the positions in terms of time to fill, skills required, adaptability towards changing circumstances, etc. And second is retention, the likelihood that the organization will be able to retain the employee currently holding these positions. So all of that tells you that if I am confident that I will be able to retain this person, then I don't need to worry too much about this role, because this person will be staying with us. For example, in one company, I know the leadership generally doesn't move from that company. Why? Because they are all based abroad, and all of them have been given a lot of stock options. So all of them are invested in the company. Okay, so therefore, the leadership doesn't really think of leaving that company. They have a lot of stocks invested, and they also, get paid in the foreign currency. So they have, they are very well taken care of, if I may say so. And therefore, the retention of the leadership is very high, and the succession planning is focused on the next level, not the top leadership, but the level beneath them. Okay, then moving on, we come back to the inverted L. We had looked at this tool earlier. So we look at potential and performance on X and Y axes, and people who are high on potential and high on performance, those are the people who are your top talents, and you need to ensure that these people can be groomed for the next level. But it's not enough to just groom such a small section of your employee base. You also have to look at people who are high potential but medium performance, and medium potential but high performance. So those people also need to be figured, and they also should be part of your pool, which will provide for succession planning. So you remember this we had come across earlier. So this basically helps you, identify your top performers and people with the highest potential. And this is a very simple tool, but a useful tool. I think if I remember correctly, we had also discussed that how do we understand potential? This is so subjective. Yes, it is subjective. There are many things which are subjective, and we have to live with the subjectivity. But the subjectivity gets diluted if there are many stakeholders who agree upon it. So if there is a leadership panel, and they do the rating, and they put people on these boxes over here, and they mutually agree that X person needs to be in medium potential, medium performance, then the subjectivity gets reduced, because the entire panel agrees, not just one individual or two individuals, entire panel agrees that X person needs to be at a certain box. So this is a very useful tool, and it can help you in succession planning. So moving on, these are some methods which are used for evaluating talent. So as I mentioned, the most important is your annual performance appraisal. So that is the most important, and the people who get the highest rating are your high potentials. But also sometimes, especially when there is a scarcity of high potential, or there is a scarcity of talent and you're looking for quick identification. So sometimes line managers are also asked to nominate some of their best people. So they do that. Some organizations use assessment centers or development centers where people are assessed, and a good, a very comprehensive view of their capability is drawn up in the assessment center. So it should actually be called a development center. There's a small difference between a development center and assessment center. Assessment center is typically used to assess skills for hiring, while a development center is used to assess skills for development and growth within the company. Third is self-selection. You can open up some positions, that these are positions which are open. Would anybody like to apply? And depending on the number of applications you get, you can create some filters and you can screen people. Next is financial measures such as targets and sales. So that also can be used. Whoever, let's say in your sales team, whoever is the top seller, or in your operations team, which team has a consistent customer satisfaction record and consistent operational metrics record. So you can look at those also. But fundamentally, the most important input that comes is the performance management process, which is the appraisal. Any questions on this?
Sir, again, how practical is this?
See, it is,
your
yeah.
reaction on receiving that mail was that, why am I being replaced? So that is something which is very, very practical and realistic in the corporate world. So
Yeah.
theoretically, this sounds very good, but I'm not sure about the application part.
Yes, as I mentioned, see, we have to know theoretically how it is done. Actually, what it happens, it will keep varying from company to company. But what is the recommended practice? That these are the recommended. These are the some of the ways through which people identify the right talent. But while like you rightly said, such mails can come, and there can be a ulterior motive behind the mail, or it could simply be succession planning.
No, so
So
sir, as an OD consultant, if we are external consultant, we are asking the company to apply this particular tool. How
Mhm.
logical is that for talent management?
So it's a very logical tool. It's a very useful tool, and it's a right thing to do as a OD consultant. You should use such tools because it brings a objectivity to the whole process. Instead of doing a focus group discussion and asking 10 people to think who are the best people, you can follow some of these, like a development center or assessment center is a very robust way of gauging who are your top people. It reduces the subjectivity. See, there can never be in HR, in like sometimes I come across people who have a degree in engineering or in science, and they come to management, they do a MBA, and they say, "Here, what is this rubbish? There is no theory, there is no formula. Uh, this also is right, this also is right." Sometimes you have a democratic management style that is succeeding. Sometimes you have a command and control management style that is also succeeding. Sometimes both of them are failing. So what is going on here? Management is a crazy science. We are used to physics and mathematics which are clear. Pythagoras theorem says that a right angle triangle, the one of this is the equivalent to the square root of the other two angles. So it is in black and white. There is no gray area in that. But management is more gray area than black or white. So what is going on here? But that is how it is. We have to navigate through the black and white, all the grays. There are no blacks and whites. So that is how it is. So we always long for clarity. We always long for objectivity, but objectivity will always elude you. But the point is, as a OD consultant or as a facilitator, our point is that you should use tools which take you closer to objectivity. It will never be completely objective. It will always be a bit subjective. But how much subjectivity can you reduce and how much objective can you make? That would be the effort of a OD consultant.
Yes, makes sense. Thank you, sir. And I guess
Yes.
competency metrics that you just mentioned will go a long way in bringing objectivity to
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like in Hindi, there is a saying that, दूध का दूध पानी का पानी हो जाता है अगर उसको ठीक से करें हम. अगर किसी को जबरदस्ती रेटिंग दिलवाना है फिर तो वो अलग कहानी है, मगर अगर उसको ऑब्जेक्टिवली किया जाए तो वो अच्छा टूल.
Yeah, so as an external person, we can offer that this is a chance. Then how are you going to introduce the process and how are you going to implement depends on you, rather than focusing on the negativity. That makes much more sense. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, sure. And sometimes people go for external consultants only because of this, because external consultants bring objectivity, because they don't know anybody, they have no friends inside, they will not be partial, so they bring external consultants. Okay, so so this is an example from IBM how this happens. So I think I will stop here today. So this requires some intense discussion. So we will start over here next time. But so far, any questions on the skill matrix and on the succession planning? Okay,
Sir,
if not,
any Indian examples, can we read about them somewhere? And does it make a difference, the Indian culture and American culture, as far as the skill matrix defining goes?
okay, was that Benita?
Yes, sir.
Okay. See, my experience has been that yes, yes, there is a difference between how we do it in Indian culture. Like for example, I've seen that See, I have worked in the IT and BPO industry for many, many years. And our industry is very influenced by whatever happens in American companies. Now, one of the things that happens in American companies regularly is called the skip level meeting. A skip level meeting is where the team goes and meets not their manager, but the manager's manager, who finds out are they happy, are they okay, if everything is going all right or not. Now, the same idea is brought into Indian organizations, which are more hierarchical. And in Indian organizations, it is taken as an offense that आप मेरे manager से मिलने गए थे, and you said, because everybody cannot give all positive feedback, there can be some negative feedback also, or there can be something which may not be positive, which may not be negative, but may not be positive. But that is not accepted in a nice way, because in a hierarchical culture, you cannot say anything critical to the superior. Whereas in a Western culture, particularly in American culture, the culture tends to be more flat, not hierarchical. So they do skip level regularly. But in Indian culture, that is taken as an offense. So some of these tools are effective, but not always effective in a Indian environment.
Yeah, thank you.
One has to be sensitive to that environment.
So, sir, if I want to read about Indian examples, where can I go and check them?
I don't think there are Indian examples, but
Okay.
but there is, I think, a book called Indian Managers. You can read about that. Because see, India is a more actually, in many ways, India is a more competitive marketplace, because people have less money. So to extract money out of the Indian consumer is more difficult than extracting money out of the Western consumer. So therefore, Indian organizations have to be that much more cost sensitive. So as far as cost sensitivity is concerned, Indian organizations are much better, more advanced than global organizations. But as far as scalability and mature processes are concerned, then global organizations are better. So that's how it is. But if you can look at any tool, any tool, you can actually think of how it would get applied in a Indian situation, and the Indian situation would be slightly different. And that goes not only for Indian situation. To be honest, a lot of Western, management theory, it applies very differently in Japan. Like in Japan, like we talk about work-life balance and things like that. In Japan, if you are actually sleepy in a meeting, it's seen as a good thing. That means he's really working hard, and they have something called karoshi. Karoshi means if you are supposed to do 8.5 hours in a day, and you are still doing 12 hours a day, which is, you're putting in almost 3 hours extra, then they respect you, that, wow, this guy does karoshi. So different cultures have different applications, and these tools are also applied. They change in their application when they are getting applied in different geographies. I will give you another example.
Makes sense.
Sorry?
Continue, please, sir.
I will give you another example. When I was in GE, the CEO of GE was Jack Welch. And Jack Welch used to say that you should work. He used to say this to all the managers. You should work to make yourself redundant. So, as a manager, I took it to my heart that I have to make myself redundant, which meant that if I become redundant, I will get a bigger responsibility, like we discussed here earlier. But when I joined an Indian organization, I realized that if I work towards making myself redundant, I will actually be redundant and out of a job very soon. So I have to ensure that I am very, very important, and I have to ensure that I do not teach anything to my subordinate. Because if he gets as smart as I am, then what will happen to my job? So I cannot follow the principle that make yourself redundant in every organization. So therefore, any tool, any thought, it has to be contextualized. It has to be understood in the context of that organization. Maybe Jack Welch said it in the context of GE, which is a huge company, and they constantly need talent. So they need to move talent from one place to another. But that cannot be applied in every organization. Maybe not just Indian, even US organizations, that cannot be applied. It can be applied only in very large MNCs.
Yes,
So-
so somehow I found that even in larger organizations in India, there is this Sethia culture. Sort of, I put it as a Sethia culture where the CEO's decisions are pretty final and they are, I feel, a bit arbitrary in taking those decisions. And the key positions of that organizations are filled based on whether the CEO likes the person or not, rather than something open about this skills or that. कि साहिब ने गमी हो, like, you know, साहब को अच्छा लगा तो वो बंदा वहां पे है.
Mhm.
And this is true for bigger, like, not just like in media from where I come. This is pretty rampant, but I've seen this across all other organizations also, bigger organizations.
Yes, I agree with you. You know, even for bigger organizations, the boss has to like you. That is because they don't have very healthy processes, which make these things objective. If they have healthy processes and good tools, then they would not need to, you know, if I may use the term, suck up to the boss. Otherwise, in many organizations, they spend more time to make their boss happy rather than focusing on their work.
Yeah, so sir, that is what I wanted to ask you. Am I being too cynical in this, or you have seen this trend in Indian organizations? And that is why I was asking about Indian organizations. All the examples that you have given, IBM, GE, are not those typical Indian.
Yes, but in Indian companies, the IT companies are very good, like Cognizant, Wipro, Infosys. They have very good processes, and they have to have because all their clients are US clients. If they don't have proper processes, then you know they will not succeed. So they are also Indian, and they are doing very well. They have very good processes. They have world-class processes. So
Okay,
sometimes
thank
it is
you.
also the industry.
So any Indian industry publication comes up with such figures? Like if I want to do an industry-based analysis, any figures that are published?
I can't think of anything offhand. If I come across something, I will share it.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. Welcome. Okay, so we will close for the day. Thank you for your time, and we will catch up next week, same time. Stay safe, stay healthy, be careful. Take care. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Arun.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.